For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor here at Hoboken Grace. For those of you who do know me, I want to share a little bit of a disclaimer. I have not given up on life. I'm just trying to grow a beard, okay? I know it kind of looks like I've given up on life. People are a little worried. Man, Chris looks a little depressed. No, I went fly fishing out in Montana. It's kind of a requirement when you go fly fishing out there, you're supposed to come back and grow a beard. So I'm going to try it. I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know which will happen first, that I actually grow a beard or my wife says that's enough. That's enough. I'm not sure which one, but you're in this journey with me now, and we'll see what happens. Today is a really special day for us because today was our child dedication Sunday. All throughout the morning, families brought their little ones to be dedicated to God, and there's certain commitments that they made in that. I'm going to share those with you in just a moment. For those of you who don't know, we don't have Grace Kids here at our third service right now, so we don't have any families who are dedicating little ones in this service, but I want for you to be a part of that with them. And as we're on this journey, or this in the midst of this series called Learning to Love Roller Coasters, I think there's something in those commitments that I actually think speaks directly to what I think God has for us as we continue to look at, okay, how do we enjoy and how do we engage well the ride that God has in store for us in this story. Now, to get us to that, let me share with you really quickly the commitments that these families made. And maybe you're here and you have little ones and maybe you're thinking about maybe being a part of this in the future. We would love for you to do that. There's 3 commitments that these families make. Number 1 is, do you commit to raise your child as God's, understanding that they are a special gift that you've been given and not yours? It's a very difficult commitment for parents to make because it's really easy to believe that they are ours. As part of this, we understand that God loves your child more than you do. God knows your child better than you do, and God has a better plan for your child than you do. We're actually going to dig into that a little bit more. The second commitment is, do you commit to teaching and training your child to depend on Him by putting your relationship with God first, putting your marriage second, and putting your child third? This doesn't mean you put your child last. There's a lot of things that come after this. It means that they're third, and you understand that the love that you share inside of your marriage is actually the foundation upon which a child understands love, not just love in general, but God's love as well. And so you understand the priority that deserves, and then ultimately understand that discipleship is something that's taught. It's not something, it's something that's demonstrated. It's not just something that's taught. And so you're going to give that priority. And then the third commitment is, do you commit to creating a safe place for your child to meet Christ by being humble and growing in Christ yourselves, by welcoming rebuke when you are wrong, and by being the same people in public as you are at home? And so these are the commitments that these families made today before us to God. Now, in that, we as a church family also made a commitment back to them. I'm actually going to invite you to make that commitment now, because even though you weren't part of those services, you're part of our family. And this is something that we do together. And we understand that God wants for us to love well the little ones who are part of our families. So this is the commitment that we made back to them. Hoboken Grace commits to create a safe church family by joining together to fight gossip and broken relationships in our church family. We understand that broken relationships are going to happen, but we're going to work to restore those relationships by admonishing each other when we're wrong. Not only do we ask the parents to commit to acknowledge when they're wrong, but we're going to do that ourselves by welcoming rebuke when we are wrong as church, by showing the authentic love that Christ has for each of these children. It's interesting when you hear Kelvin and Nancy talk about the Home Initiative. If you don't know what that is, one of the things that we're working to do right now inside of our city is to establish a community center from which we're going to be able to love in ways that we've only dreamed of in the past. And one of the things that's driving that is this commitment that we have made for 14 years now here at Hoboken Grace to the little ones who are part of our family. And we've made this commitment year after year after year. And we've said, no, we're going to do everything that we can to show the authentic love that Christ has for each of these children. Those children are now in junior high and senior high. And one of the things that we realize is that if we're going to follow through on that commitment, we need space in which to do that. And so if you're not a part of that, I highly encourage you to be a part of the Home Initiative and what God's doing inside of our community. So those are the commitments that they made. This is the commitment that we made back to them. And right now, I'm actually going to give you a chance to make that commitment. So I'm going to read the commitment again. And then at the end of it, I'm going to say, if you intend, if you intend to make that commitment today, please respond with a "we do." And together as a family, we'll continue to stand behind those little ones. So let me read it to you again. Hoboken Grace commits to create a safe church family by joining together to fight gossip and broken relationships in our church family, by admonishing each other when we are wrong, by welcoming rebuke when we're wrong as a church, and by showing the authentic love that Christ has for each of these children. If you intend to make that commitment and stand behind the little ones who are dedicated today, then I would ask you to respond now with a strong "we do." Excellent. Excellent. And as we walk through those commitments today, and as we continue to make that commitment as a family, one of the things that I was really excited about is that not only was today Child Dedication Sunday, but also, as I said earlier, right now we're in the midst of this conversation called Learning to Love Roller Coasters. And I think the two work really, really well together. Because if life is a roller coaster, parenting is when roller coasters go on steroids. And the twists get faster and the drops get bigger. And there's all sorts of things that you don't understand or that you don't expect. And I think that as you look at these commitments, I think there's something in there that actually speaks to one of the things that helps us to enjoy the ride. Now, if you haven't been with us, a couple weeks ago, we launched into this conversation and we looked at this powerful thing that Jesus said, this powerful moment where Jesus speaks something into our lives that seems contradictory because we don't see the world the way that he sees the world. Let me remind you of it. John 16:33, Jesus says this, "I've told you these things so that you may have peace." He says, "I want for you to experience peace. In this world, you will have trouble." Now, to us, those seem contradictory. Wait a second, you want me to have peace, but you're telling me that I'm going to have trouble? But take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus seems to believe that you can have peace in the midst of trouble. He doesn't see these things as contradictory because apparently he has done something. Not only does he say to his disciples that this is going to be possible, but then we looked in the book of Acts as the church is launching and we saw this lived out. As a matter of fact, when their lives are threatened, their request before God was not, "God, get us out of this ride. God, smooth out this ride. God, change this ride." No, their request was for boldness. Acts 4. "And now, Lord, consider their threats and enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness." What is it that they're asking for? They're asking for boldness, not get us off this ride. Help us to ride the ride better. And so we walked out of week 1 and we said, how in the world do you do that? What was it that Jesus said? What was it that Jesus said that leads to peace, even when you know there's going to be trouble? How did they see the world that allowed them to be able to actually experience it and live that out? Last week, Anthony unpacked the first step in that. It was a powerful conversation. I don't know if you were here to be able to hear that and experience that, but I highly encourage you, if you weren't, to watch it online because he shared with us one of the first pieces to the puzzle. If you're going to ride well, if you're going to step into it with boldness, if you're going to experience peace, even when you know there's trouble, one of the first keys to that is that you have to know where it is that you're going. You have to know how the ride ends. Why is it that you can enjoy the roller coaster? Because I know how it ends. And people will often say to me, "Man, I wish I knew how this would work out. I wish God would tell me how this is going to end." He actually has. And for those who've placed their trust in him, there is no question of how the ride's going to end. There's no question of who it is that you're going to be with at the end. There's no question as to how it's going to work out. He's eliminated any question of that in our lives. The first piece is that you have to understand how the ride is going to end. But there's more to it than that. And as a matter of fact, when you look back at that passage in Acts and you see them praying for boldness, in their prayer, they actually enlighten us to what it is that allows them to engage the ride this way. So I want to take you back to that prayer. We're going to go a little bit further back and we're going to look at the full prayer before they get to the request for boldness. Acts chapter 4, beginning in verse 26. Again, this is them praying after their lives have been threatened. It says, "The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Indeed, Herod and Pontius Pilate met together with the Gentiles and the people of Israel in this city to conspire against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed. And as they're praying, they're acknowledging the story that has taken place and the reality that all of these powers were working against God's plan. And all of these powers, it seemed, had overcome God's plan because they put Jesus to death. But then listen to this next line, because this is the key line. It says, they did what your power and will had decided beforehand should happen. This is an amazing line. Because as their lives are threatened, they go before God and they're recounting this story in their prayer to God. And as they sum up the story, they say, you know what? It looked to the rest of us like the train had gone off the tracks. It looked to the rest of us like all of these powers were actually the ones who were telling the story and that God had lost. And it looked like Herod and Pontius Pilate had actually won and they thwarted your plan. But the reality is, and this is what their confidence was found in. Listen. This is exactly what their confidence is found in. But what we now realize is that they were actually working in accordance with your power and will. And they, without even knowing it, actually executed what you had decided beforehand should happen. And this is crucial if you're going to learn to love roller coasters. Because not only do you have to know how the ride is going to end, you have to trust the designer of the ride. You have to trust the designer of the ride. And in this moment, you know what they're saying? Even when it doesn't look like you're in control, we know you are. Even when it looked like someone else had taken control of the ride, you were in control the whole time. What was it that allowed them to be able to engage the journey differently? Why could they pray for boldness? Because, you see, they trusted the designer of the ride. This is crucial with roller coasters. If you've ever ridden a roller coaster, you know that this is true. One of the reasons why you can go to Six Flags and get on that roller coaster and enjoy it is because you trust the designer. You trust that they've tested it. You trusted that they've worked this out. And some of you are looking at me like, no, I don't trust it. I don't trust it at all. I don't ride roller coasters. That's fine. There's some of you who don't enjoy roller coasters. But if you're going to learn to enjoy roller coasters, which I highly suggest that you do because they're wonderful, then you have to trust the designer. And there's a big difference between people who enjoy them and people who don't, because people who don't enjoy them the entire time on the ride, you know what they're thinking? What if this thing fails? What if this thing fails? What if this thing... They don't trust the designer. It was interesting for me. This was tested in a whole different way this last time that I went to Six Flags because I went and rode the Superman ride. How many of you have ridden the Superman ride at Six Flags? Okay, a few of you had. It's an entire different experience for me because most of the rides you're sitting down and the bar comes down over top of you. And I've never really had to trust the designer fully. At least in my mind, I told myself that because I thought, you know what, if this bar, like if for some reason it comes loose, I'm strong enough to hold it down. And I'm pretty sure like I can brace myself where I'll be able to hold myself in, even if we go upside down. I think I'm probably lying to myself, but it helps me feel better when I get on the ride that if something were to go wrong, I'm okay. I think I could hold on to it. But with Superman, you don't have a chance in the world of holding yourself into that ride because you're not sitting down, you're not standing up. They actually lower you so you look like and you feel like you're flying. And this harness is holding you in. And as I got on that ride, I realized if this harness fails, there's not a chance in the world I'm going to live. I'm not strong enough. And part of me, there was actually a point in the ride as I'm working through this in my mind, and as I'm thinking through the implications of how I'm now situated in relation to the ground, where I actually worked my arms into the harnesses, trying to tell myself in some way, shape, or form that if it fails, hopefully I can hold on while I'm flailing through the air. There's not a chance I was going to succeed. But I had to make myself feel better. When you get on the ride, one of the things that allows you to enjoy it or not enjoy it is how you trust the designer. And some of you, you trust the designer. You tell your friends, no, it's fine. People haven't died on roller coasters for years. It's gonna be okay. And you just make sure they don't Google that. And then, and then you go to the state fair, which is a whole different experience and a whole different level of trust. I don't think they even know who designed those rides. They're so old. They're probably dead. And that's just taking life into your own hands. But, and this is undeniable. Listen to me. This is undeniable. Your experience is directly related to how you trust the designer. It's directly related to how you trust the designer. And the same thing is not just true with roller coasters. It's true with life. I remember when God opened my eyes to this in my own life in a very powerful way. Many of you know my second son has Down syndrome, and my whole experience with learning to love roller coasters is very intertwined with my son being born with Down syndrome. This was kind of an interesting way that God used that in my life to expose something in me that I didn't know was there. So when my son was born, we didn't know beforehand that he had Down syndrome. As a matter of fact, the doctor came into our room at like 2 a.m. in the morning after he had been born and said, hey, listen, we have to take your son to a different hospital. We think that he has Down syndrome. We don't know. We actually didn't find out for 2 weeks. So we have to take him to this other hospital, and he's going to be in the ICU there. Your wife has to stay in this hospital. My older son, because I had a son who's 2 years older than him, was staying with my parents. And I found myself in this situation where now I was traveling from hospital to hospital to go see my son. And I'm traveling to all these different places trying to care for my family in the midst of trying to figure out what in the world is going on with Kale, who's my second son. And I remember exactly where I was on the turnpike because I was driving from here to Patterson where Kale was. And I remember getting on the turnpike, and I remember that I was just weeping as I'm trying to figure out what in the world's going on. And I just left my wife alone at the other hospital. And I began to cry out to God. And like never before in my life, I began to cry out to God, God, I need you. God, what is happening here? I need you to step into this moment. I need you right now. I need to know that you're real. I need to know that you're with me. And I just began bawling, and I was weeping, and I was crying out to God. And I'll never forget what God spoke to my heart, because it wasn't at all what I expected. I expect for God to say, oh, I love you, Chris, or I got you. I'm there for you. That's probably what you expected me to say, but that's not actually what I heard God say to my heart. What I heard God say to my heart was this: Chris, why is it that you think you need me with Kale and you don't with Caden? And it stopped me dead in my tracks. Because God was exposing something in me that I didn't realize was there. You see, with Kale, all of a sudden the ride got a little bit out of control, and I realized I wasn't in control. But in that moment, God revealed the fact that from really all of Caden's life, I thought, no, I can control this ride. I got it. When Kale was born, I thought, there's no way I can design this ride. But with Caden, I thought, no, I know what I'm doing. And so God asked, why is it that you think you need to trust me with one and not with the other? Some of you have heard me talk about my son with Down syndrome, and you've thought to yourself, man, you'd really have to trust God if that happened. Why is my story different than yours? Why do you think you'd have to trust God more then? I don't ask you that to frighten you. I ask you that because, for the same reason that I believe God asked me that question, because there's a twist coming. There's a twist coming that you don't anticipate. And if you think that you're the designer, and if you think that you've got it under control, and if you think that you can tell the story the best way, when that twist comes, you're going to get really pissed at God. And you're going to look at it and say, God, you're messing up my story. And rather than enjoying the roller coaster, you're going to become angry and you're going to become bitter. I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. But God says, no, wait. You're not the designer. You're not the designer. You're not the one who's telling this story. And if you'll trust me with that, when the twist comes, you can know that you don't have to be afraid. Why? Because I know the one who knew it was coming. And I know what kind of storyteller he is. It may have surprised me, but it didn't surprise him. And even when, and this is why this church could pray the way that they did, even when it looks like it's gone off the rails. No. It's never outside of the designer's hands. Listen to me. It's never outside of the designer's hands. And Jesus gave his life and rose from the dead. Jesus used Pontius Pilate and Herod to demonstrate that reality so that you and I could engage the ride differently. So that we could recognize, there's no way I could tell that story. There's no way I could design that story. There's no way I could design a story that great. So that we would give up control of the design. But even more than that, not only so that we would give up control of the design, but so that we could actually enjoy the ride. Now, here's the thing. Some of you've gone halfway with this. And this is, to be honest with you, this is where I am in my own life. So this is a journey. This is not something you're going to accomplish over the course of 6 weeks. This is a lifelong journey learning how to love roller coasters, but it is possible. You know how I know it's possible? Because Paul got thrown into prison, and you know what he did? He threw his hands up. Paul got thrown into prison, and the guy is constantly singing. I don't know. You want to talk about somebody who loves to sing. I can't imagine. Paul loved to sing. I can't wait to meet the guy. He's probably going to be singing the second you meet him in heaven, because all these stories, he's singing. And when things go bad, that's what he does. He sings. Paul gets thrown into prison. They're sitting in prison, and they're singing and celebrating who God is. They're literally in the midst of the roller coaster turning upside down, and they have their hands up. And don't think like, oh, he did it because it was the right thing to do. No. I don't believe that for a second. He did it because he believed this. He trusted the designer above everything else, that he knew that the designer would never let him down, even if it cost him his life, because he knew where he was going to end up. He knew it, and he trusted it. So when it flipped, his arms went up. Now, here's the thing. Many of you are riding this ride, and you trust, but you're riding it the same way that I rode the Superman roller coaster. A lot of people ride that Superman roller coaster, and they put their arms out like my son. He was riding with me. He loves roller coasters. He trusts the designer more than I do, probably because he's a kid and he's ignorant, okay? But he does. He trusts. And he gets on that roller coaster and he rides the Superman roller coaster. His arms are straight out like this. He's like, I'm flying. Look at me. I'm flying. I did not ride it that way. I had my arms twisted into that thing because I kind of trusted the designer. but I needed a backup plan. That's where I am in life. I kind of trust the designer, but I live a lot of my life thinking, I better have a backup plan. I wish I could tell you it was different. I wish I could tell you that I'd gotten to the point where I could ride with my hands up all the time. But I'm not there. But it's possible. And it's worth pursuing. Because can you imagine what it's like to actually ride the ride the way Paul did? To finally let go of the anxiety and the worry, to let go of the weight that so many of you carry of trying to make the track what you think it's supposed to be. Some of you live your life every day, you're anxious because you're trying to design the ride yourself. You can't do it and you have to let go of it. And can I share something with you? The story you're trying to tell isn't as good as the story he's trying to tell. The ride you're trying to build isn't as good as the ride he's built for you. But you have to trust the designer. And not just where you have your hands on the constraints, but where you actually put your arms out. And you experience the peace and the joy. Because make no mistake about it, my son enjoyed that roller coaster a lot more than I did. He had incredible peace, incredible joy, because he trusted the designer. And you know who was right? My son was right. How are you experiencing the ride? Are you still believing that you're the designer? Today is the day to give the plans to him. Are you trusting the designer, but you always have a backup plan? I'll trust you so far, God, but I'm not going to go that far. I'll trust you to this point, but I'm not. No, I don't know if I can really celebrate you in the midst of the turn. I don't know. Today's the day to throw up your hands. He's proven that he's faithful as the designer. He's proven that he's faithful as the designer. That's not a question. The question isn't whether or not the design will hold up. It will. And it will be better than anything you could have designed. The question is, how will we ride the ride? And make no mistake about it, it's up to us and our willingness to push ourselves over and over again. No. I'm going to put my hands up. You know how my second son rides roller coasters? Kale loves roller coasters. He rides every ride with his hands up, and he laughs the entire time. That's how I want to ride the roller coaster. And I invite you today to join me in pursuing that with him. Will you pray with me? Father, intellectually, we know not only that you're the designer, but we know that you can be trusted in that. And yet, letting go is so hard for so many of us. I pray that today, as we reflect on your faithfulness, as we look back at the example of Paul and even this early church, as they're praying for boldness, I pray for those who've never trusted you with the design, who've never said, no, you know what? I'm going to trust the ultimate designer. I know I can't do it. I pray that today that they would hand over those plans, that they would let go of that weight that they constantly carry, that they have to figure it out and they got to make it work, to understand that, no, you've taken that. You want to take that. You want that responsibility. Pray that they'd give it to you. And then, Father, I pray for those of us who've given you that plan, but we keep reaching for those backups. We keep being nervous, sometimes hesitant to go all in. I pray that in faith, we would put our hands up, that we would realize that, no, even in the midst of trouble, we can have peace. Even in the midst of trouble, we can have joy. Not just because we know where this journey is going to end, but because we know the one who designed the whole path, the entire ride. And there's no one who loves us more, and there's no one who's been more faithful than you. In Jesus' name, amen.